So, as follows. We begin the Maamar with Pasach Eliyahu. And the Rebbe explains that Eliyahu Hanavi is really saying three things. He's saying that in godliness, there are three general categories. There's God himself, who is above and beyond Seder Hishtalshalos, meaning he's above in a way that he has no shaykhis to Hishtalshalos. And like you would say, Ani Havai Leishanisi, Hashem doesn't change, the whole world, everything is all completely bottled to him, etc. These things the Rebbe doesn't mention, I'm adding. And then there is above Hishtalshalos, but shaykh to Hishtalshalos, which we said that's, for example, Chitzenis HaKeser Arich, which in the Lashon of Pasach Eliyahu, that's Antu, Ilah, Al Kol Ilah, exalted above all exalted ones. That's above Hishtalshalos, but shaykh to Hishtalshalos. And then we have Hishtalshalos, the 10 spheres of Atzilus. And then the Rebbe Rayatz concludes in the Maamar that through Mesiras Nefesh we bring from Antu Chad into the Esher spheres, and thereby that which is above nature is drawn into nature. In fact, the Rebbe in Eis Beis two questions. Question number one. Anything above the 10 spheres of Atzilus is above Hishtalshalos, and therefore above nature. So why is it that in order to bring above nature into nature, you specifically have to bring down from the level of Antu Chad, which is Hashem himself? Seemingly, anything above the 10 spheres is already above nature, and then you're bringing above nature into nature. You don't have to go all the way to Antu Chad, to the highest level. Question number one. Question number two, why do you have to go anywhere? The 10 spheres, which are running the world, they themselves are really linked with Ein Sof. Even after the Ur is Mislavish and the Kalim, we know that the Kav is still linked with Ein Sof, Lifnei Tzimtzum. It just says Ein Sof Habli Gul. Interesting. It does say Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. Yeah. And nevertheless, we say that the Shleimus of Teva is bringing higher than Teva into Teva. Now the Rebbe posits and says, you could say that maybe it just means that we should be able to see that God is running everything. So the Rebbe says that if that was the kavanah, that's what we would say, but that's not what we say. We say you have to bring higher than nature into nature. That's the perfection of nature, is bringing that which is above it into it, not just to be able to see that God is running the world. That's not enough. So these two questions the Rebbe asks in Eis Beis. Number one, why do you have to go all the way to Antu Chad? Number two, why do you have to go anywhere? The 10 spheres of Atzilus are already linked to Ein Sof Habli Gavul. Eis Gimel. Here is where we start explaining. We start building a foundation. So you say like this. Nature comes from Shem Elikim, and miracles come from Shem Havaya. Now, Shem Havaya and Shem Elikim are also two different perspectives. There's Das Elyon and Das Tachten. Das Elyon Havaya is that the world doesn't exist. Das Tachten, which is Elikim, is that the world does exist, and in fact, God is the one that doesn't exist. Now, the Rebbe explains briefly, but this is an important point, although it's in parentheses, that the reason why Elikim is Teva and Havaya is Nes is because Shem Elikim creates in a way of Hislabshus. That means that involvement and clothement. I'm involved. I'm tailoring my energy to you. I'm speaking your language. So that's Shem Elikim. And that's what nature is. Nature is guiding each creation according to its capabilities, according to its tools, according to its functions. Shem Havaya just is. I just create. I'm like the sun. I just emit light. You like it, you don't like it, I don't care. I'm creating. They were automatically created. So Hashem is running the world on this level according to the way he wants, not according to the way the creations want. And that's where miracles come from. And so that's explaining the link between the two concepts of miracles to Shem Havaya and Das Elyon, and nature to Shem Elikim and Das Tachten. So That was Eis Gimel. So what? So the Rebbe concludes in Eis Gimel and he says, so what's accomplished? So now that we explained that there's Das Elyon and Das Tachton, there's really two different perspectives. That's what a miracle in nature is. They're two different perspectives. So what happens when a miracle occurs in the world? What's really happening? The higher perspective, God's perspective that the world is nothing, is coming down into our world and connecting. They're becoming completely one. Which this is the idea that the Rebbe leaves us with in Eis Gimel. And obviously this is going to need to be elaborated. We'll pause for a brief l'chaim. Chaim l'chaim. Eis Daled. This is something that's explained in many Maamarim. You would think that you're a liar. You're living a lie. You think that you exist and God doesn't exist, meaning he's out of your world. You don't relate to him. And you think that that's a lie. Well, guess what? It's true. Both opinions, both opinions exist. They're both true because they both come from God himself. What do you mean they both come from God himself? Well, in regards to Ein Seif, it says in Tikkun Zayar, which is, Pasach Eliyahu is the Hakdama for Tikkun Zayar. It says that Ein Seif is the Maila Adin Kates, Ulamata Mata Adin Tachlis. He's above to no end and below to no conclusion. And this is not just saying that Hashem is everywhere. Above and below means I'm above you means I'm hiding from you. Below you means I relate to everything about you. I can go all the way. So these two notions in Ein Seif are the source for these two opinions. So both of these things come from God, therefore they're both true because God is the essence of truth. So when God hides himself, or the way God hides himself, that gives room for Das Tachton. The way God shows himself, that gives room for Das Elyon. This is what's explained in the Maamar. Now, for the Rebbe, the obvious question. Why does that show that Das Tachton is true and not a lie? If God is hiding himself, and that's the source for Das Tachton, that's why it's a lie. If God is interacting, he's showing his truth, and then you say, and that creates Das Tachton, I understand. Fine, so it's true. But if God is hiding himself, he's showing darkness, he's leaving room for your consciousness, he's leaving room for you to make mistakes, he's not showing you, he's not in your face, so then obviously you're going to make a mistake. So why do we say that that shows that Das Tachton is true? Hey. Okay, whatever. We're not going to listen. No. So, so that was actually the second question. The first question the Rebbe asks is, seemingly, if Das Tachton, or being that Das Tachton, comes from Hashem hiding himself, so then the ultimate, and that's nature, then the ultimate thing would be for Hashem to reveal himself in Das Tachton. In other words, just that we should see that really the world is not a yesh. Yeah, you should be able to see that the reason why you exist is not a lie, rather it's because God is creating you. That should be the what's special about Das Tachton. That would be the shleimus of Das Tachton. That would be the shleimus of nature. Like we asked before, this is a mirror of the question we asked in the previous, in Eis Beis, about seemingly the shleimus of nature would be to realize that God is running the world. So the shleimus of your ego would be to realize that God is creating your ego. And nevertheless, in the Maamar, it explains that no, the shleimus of Das Tachton is that Das Elyon should come into it, which means you're getting God's perspective. We're not showing you the revelation of Das Tachton, we're bringing something else in. And then there is the second question which we asked, which is that seemingly we are living a lie. We're not, the reason why we have an ego is not because of Ein Seif, it's because God is hiding himself. And nevertheless, you say that, oh, but it's true. Why is it true if it's darkness? Chapter 5. So then, now let's really talk about nature. What is nature? We didn't really define nature. Well, you open the can of worms because there's many different interpretations. And we're going to see here in this chapter, we're going to see 3 interpretations. Interpretation number 1 is that nature is really consistent miracles. miracles mean something that's coming from God himself. Nature is also comes from God himself. So nature is just something that you get used to, but really it's the same thing as a miracle. Then, second interpretation is what it says in the Mishnah, which is that nature is referring to the tsura of a person. Tsura, because it says in the Mishnah that Hashem is teveya. That means he mints each person with the same mold as Adam Harishon. And nobody is similar to each other. So we're going to see soon. We're going to explain in Eis Vav or Zayin what that means more. We're going to explain that it's going on the soul of the person and also the shape and the distinctive qualities of each and every person's body. And then interpretation number 3 is that nature is anything which doesn't make any sense. There's no rationale. It's just this is the way it works. That's the fact. And it's explained in the Maamar that these 3 interpretations are actually 3 separate ideas. The fact that nature is referring to constant miracles means that when I say the word nature, I'm referring to how the world runs. When I say that nature is referring to the way people are, whether their soul or their body, that means that I'm referring to the life force, his life. And we explained at length the difference between life and existence. So then nature is referring to the godly life force within the world and the godly life force within a person. What does that have to do with actual nature? Is because your nature, the way you function, is according to the godly life force which creates you. And then the third, so that's that idea. So there's the way the world runs, there's why the world runs that way, and then there is anything that doesn't make sense. That is actually referring to not life force, but creative force. Because creation is above the parameters of intellect. Because the fact that we're alive, although we don't completely grasp it, but we know what life looks like, but we don't really understand what non-existence is to existence. So therefore, it's above our nature. So the 3 interpretations are really 3 distinct ideas. Nature, how the world runs. Nature, how the world lives. And nature, how the world exists. Chapter 6. So, the 2 interpretations of nature, that it's the last 2 interpretations, that it's referring to how the world lives and how the world exists, relate to a 4th interpretation of nature, which is that Teva is Milashon Tubu B'Yamsuf, that it was submerged in the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. Why? Why is there this interpretation? Because does it mean that something is submerged? Submerged means that the thing exists, and, parentheses, therefore, the water covers over it. So nature means when something is being concealed. This applies both to the life force and the creative force. They're both submerged. They're both hidden. In regards to life force, what does it mean that it's hidden? I see I'm alive. I see this is alive. And I see that is dead. What does it mean? It means I don't recognize where it's coming from. I don't recognize that it's coming from anywhere. Things look like they're living on their own. Okay, now the chiddush is that this also applies to existence. Existence also is something which is hidden from us. Why? Because life is something that I recognize. Like we said, life is apparent. It's very clear whether something is alive or not. But like we said, we don't know really. We can't really get in touch with the feeling of what it means to exist because we can't experience what it means to not exist, right? We don't know what it means to not exist. We can see things that are dead, although we don't experience what is dead, but we can have somewhat of a grasp of what it means to be dead. It's the lack of life, but we don't really know what the lack of existence is because we've never seen something like that, obviously. So that's the chiddush of saying that it's submerged. Now, the reason for all this, why is it all hidden, is because the godly life force and the godly creative force enclose itself in creations through concealing garments. So, although they both, and this is, we're going to finish here, I think. Although both interpretations of the last two interpretations of nature, that it's referring to the life force and it's referring to the creative force, can both be applied to the fourth interpretation, that it's referring to being submerged, meaning hidden in the Red Sea. Although they're both true, that it primarily applies to the life force. Why? Because, like we said, submerged is something that I feel I'm just not in touch with, right? It exists, but it's beneath the water. So if I dig deep, I can find it. That's life force. Life force is I'm not in touch with it, but if I want, I could. If I work hard, I can actually get in touch with the fact that I'm alive, and I can get in touch. I can live with the fact that something, someone is giving me life and everything life. Okay? But when it comes to the godly creative force, because it's not something which is inside me, it exists above me, and that's what we explained, that it's Shem Havaya, it's miracles, it's Das Elyon, it's above you. It's the third interpretation, Teva, which is higher than Seichel. So therefore, you can't really use Lashon Tviyah, that it's submerged, because you can't even get in touch with it if you dig deeper. So it's really referring to the fact that it's hidden and not the way that it's hidden. Understand? So it still applies to being submerged, but it's just explaining that it's hidden. It's not explaining how it's hidden. If it would be explaining how it's hidden, that would be referring to the life force. It's hidden just like being submerged. You dig deep, you find it. But no, when it comes to creative force, it's just that it's hidden, not how it's hidden.